In an age of ever-increasing change, overwhelming access to information, and artificial intelligence, learning may be our most critical skill. Unfortunately, much of what we have learned, been taught, and had modeled for us about learning, we now know we need to unlearn. Let's explore the science of learning, unlearn some myths and bad habits, and help us be better leaders, learners, and educators. Today, I want to talk about 8 tips based on the science of learning that you can apply. I got my PhD from the University of Maryland in 2007, and it was a great 4-year experience. I learned a lot, had great colleagues, great classmates, read a lot, wrote a lot, had great faculty members. And now, getting close to 20 years later, most of the content of what I learned is quite dated. It's either been replaced by newer information, more modern things, but the skill of learning, that skill I gained in that experience, is evergreen and serves me every single day. The skill of learning is so important because the pace of change is just ever increasing. And learning can help us adapt to that change, whether it's information or skills or ways of being. And a few years ago, when we were writing this book, The Curricular Approach to Student Affairs, we wanted a chapter on learning and facilitating learning and pedagogy and critical pedagogy, and particularly looking at the science around learning. And to write the first draft of that chapter, I read 22 books on learning that summer over the course of a couple of months. And when I really cook all of that down, much of what we now know about learning from the past 15 to 20 years of both neuroscience and cognitive psychology research contradicts what we used to think we knew about learning. And this new science also affirms and validates what critical theorists like Paulo Freire, bell hooks, and others have been talking about learning for decades. So I wanted to cook all of that down, and I'm going to share it as 8 tips based on the science of learning. Let's get to it. The first tip is to engage all of the senses. Not just what people are reading or hearing you explain, but all of the senses. Touch, smell is so deeply connected to memory, what we see. And the more you can engage all aspects of a person's experience through their senses, but also their emotions and others, can really be helpful. Which leads us right into the second tip. Engage the mind, the heart, and the body. What people think is just one part. What people know is just one part of learning. But people's emotions connect with that. And also body movement. So how do we engage the body in learning? How do we engage emotions and inspiring and connecting and resonating? And also the mind. A third suggestion here from the science of learning is to foster well-being for the body and mind with sleep, rest, nutrition, hydration, and exercise. Now, we know those things are good for us physically in our bodies, and that's often how we think about them. They're actually critical to the learning process in the brain. Sleep moves memories from short-term to long-term. Rest is necessary. This process of interleaving is a really great learning strategy. Nutrition for doing the learning is also necessary, and hydration. And exercise floods the brain with neurochemicals that can make us even better learners, more open to diversity, new ideas, creativity, problem solving. A fourth idea from the science of learning is to support learners in managing stress, threats, oppression, and fear, and don't add to them. Now, oftentimes in the movies, we see this scary old professor, often a white man with a white beard, maybe teaching a law class or something like that, who's really intimidating and threatening and scary, and it really motivates the students to learn, despite how awful he is. And at the end of the movie, we often learn that he really has a heart of gold and is very kind and nice once he kind of scares you. That kind of threat and fear limits our ability to learn rather than increases it. So when we're under threat, we just look at the threat. We're looking at, if you think that thing curled up is maybe a snake, You're not paying attention to the shape of the clouds. You're looking at that, and maybe you're embarrassed when you realize it's an extension cord. And when we're not under threat, we can open up our perspective. Our peripheral vision literally expands what we can see to the left and right. And we're more open to new ideas, maybe things that challenge what we've previously learned. And so supporting learners in managing their stress, threats, oppression, and fear, and don't add to them. The fifth strategy based on the science of learning is to foster intrinsic motivation through meaning, relevance, rigor, and celebrating progress. So extrinsic motivation are grades or a promotion, or if you don't do this, I'll be mad, or that scary professor in the movies. But intrinsic motivation is finding it interesting and engaging. And I love these very clear things. Connect to the meeting. This is why this is going to be meaningful for you. This is why this is important for your life, for the world, for your relationships. The relevance. I have a daughter who's taking some near calculus classes in high school, and she of course says, like many do, I'll never use this in my life. And I said, well, I took calculus when I was in high school. I took it when I was in college, and you're right, I've never done calculus as a grown-up, but I solve problems every single day, and calculus really taught me how to be methodic, not missteps, look at things from different perspectives, and solve problems. So in one sense, I use calculus so many times every single day. And that helps it feel relevant to her life. Rigor is another one. The fact that this is challenging and difficult can increase our motivation for learning. When I'm with college students, the class that they are so focused on learning in, so dialed in, engaging in study groups, organizing, reading, really studying, is organic chemistry, because organic chemistry is really hard. And so the rigor of it, the challenge of it, increases their learning. And celebrating progress. Don't just wait till the end and did you learn or not learn, but celebrate the progress along the way, knowing this thing or that thing, building a capacity, moving from not being able to do it to being able to do it okay, to being able to do it really well, to being able to do it without really even thinking about it. The sixth strategy here is to encourage focused attention, which is mindfulness, not multitasking. And to do that in short spurts with lots of breaks. This is actually the interleaving that I mentioned earlier. So many of us pride ourselves on being good multitaskers. And those of us who think of ourselves as good multitaskers are kidding ourselves. The science says that 1% of the human population can actually do that. And it's probably not you. And it's not me. But what we want to do is give our complete and undivided attention to something for relatively short periods of time. Maybe a minute, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And then take a break and wash the dishes, scroll a little bit, tie your shoes, walk around the house, whatever it might be. But focused attention with short spurts with lots of breaks is a really great learning strategy. This is called interleaving. If you've ever tried to memorize a poem, and I'm terrible at this, one of the hardest classes I ever took in college was an acting class because I had to memorize a monologue, and it was so difficult for me. My brain just doesn't work like that. But if you want to memorize something and you just read it to yourself over and over and over, you'll find that that doesn't really work. But reading it and giving it your full attention and stepping away and trying to recall it from memory, and then coming back to it and reading it again, and stepping away and trying to write it down from memory, and then stepping away and reading it again and maybe listening to it, trying to recall it from memory. This kind of on again, off again, total focus with lots of short spurts and breaks is really helpful. Number 7, encourage doing and reflecting in an ongoing cycle. Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, I mentioned earlier, calls this praxis. So we want to try and do the thing that's hard, and then reflect. How did that go? What do I want to do differently? What went well? What didn't go very well? And then try and do that thing that's hard again, and maybe do it better. And then reflect. Was that better? Did my strategies work? And this ongoing cycle. And sometimes it's about doing, we think about this as linear, like do it and then reflect. But then we want to do it again and then reflect. And then we want to do it again and then reflect. So how do we do this in an ongoing cycle? And then number 8, the last one, is kind of 2. Cultivate positive emotions and social connections. You can think of these together because they're obviously related, but you can also think of them separately. So, positive emotions, enjoying the learning experience, enjoying the people you're doing it with, doing it in a room with some natural light and some pleasant music, and people asking how you are and using your name. Making it an enjoyable experience can be really helpful in the learning. Those positive emotions, again, open up the brain out of threat mode into a thriving mode where you can learn new things, new skills, new capacities, new perspectives. And then social connections. Feeling connected to the people you're learning with. This is why so many of us love having a good learning partner or a thinking partner who can, I read the article, here's what I think, what do you think? Oh, I didn't like this part, oh, I really like that part. Those social connections can make the learning, not just because I have a thought partner to bounce something off of, but the relationship is connected to that. And then when you're remembering the thing or applying the thing, you'll remember that great conversation you had with someone who you like, know, and care about. So those are the 8 tips or strategies to improve learning based on science. And you can apply these as you're trying to learn new things, whether it's a piece of knowledge or a new skill. Maybe you want to learn to play the guitar. Maybe you want to learn to better manage change. Any of that would be helped with these. You can also use these if you're teaching other people. Maybe you're leading a training or leading workshops or coaching someone as a supervisor. All of these things would be helped with that. And you can use these as a leader. As leaders, we often think about our work not necessarily as learning, but we could. If you want to convince your team that a new change you're making is going to be in the best interest of the organization and in the long term, aren't you encouraging learning? If you want to help people learn a new skill, maybe how to use a new technology, isn't that about learning? If you want people to develop a capacity to better supervise the new managers they're leading and develop new skills there, isn't that about learning? So much of what we do as leaders is really about learning. So, as I mentioned earlier, learning may be our most critical skill. A lot of the things that we now know based on neuroscience and cognitive psychology research contradicts what we used to think we knew about learning. This new science also affirms and validates a lot of critical pedagogy and critical theorists. So I'll put a link with a lot of this into the description, including all 8 tips or strategies. The link also has some direct links to some of the books and other materials. For more resources like this, you can join my weekly newsletter. Every week I share out my latest thinking on Tuesday morning. And every month I share a bonus email with the best of what I'm learning, contributing, and enjoying. It's all free. You can use the little code right there. I'd love to hear from you. In the comments, what of these tips is most helpful in your learning, your leading, and your educating? I look forward to hearing from you, and yes, I will read them all. Thank you for watching to the end. I hope you learned something.